So now we have our Q&A. Should I ask if anybody has an initial question? Otherwise, I have mine ready. Yes.
Hi, I have a question. So as high caliber pianists as yourselves, how do you prevent injuries from happening when you're preparing a large set of repertoire that requires like a lot of daily practice and
Who would like to start first?
Who starts?
Anybody?
Okay, I'll start.
Good.
I think you need to balance. It's very important for me, for example. I know that when I balance my practice time and then my relaxation time, it helps me to, first of all, clean my head, relax and rest my body in the way that I know that sometimes I can practice less, but it will be more productive than if I would practice more and be too tired. It's very important. And as Artymiw was saying in his memoirs, 2 books of his memoirs, he was saying that sometimes 1 hour of practice is more than enough for achieving what you need than to practice 5 hours without your head. You just need to make sure that you have a clear head to practice the right way. And then, you are not injuring yourself because you know exactly how to balance between your work and, your free time. So that works for me every time. I know when I feel already that I just can't think, I can't move my fingers the way that I should, I stop and then I do something else. There's totally different, like outside of music world, read a book or whatever, just do something else. Cook, for example. Cooking is great. So that is very good, always help me.
Yeah, I think if you read Schumann's On Music and Musicians, which has been translated from the German, it was available, published by Dover. That's my second Bible, because he has about 100 maxims for young musicians, which are absolutely true to this day. I mean, he talks about that practicing when you're tired will lead to no results, especially if you're tired. Because the most important aspect of practicing is not just the digits, the fingers, but it's also connecting and mentally, especially if you're trying to memorize something. So he warns, he says, take frequent breaks. Nowadays, we all know about the dangers of developing carpal tunnel, based on Leon Fleischer and my former teacher, Gary Graffman. And over-practicing, even though the title of his biography is I Really Should Be Practicing, he admitted later that he often practiced for too many hours without a break. So it's important. Go for a walk. Get some fresh air. Walking is very important. Or do some yoga. Do some exercise. It's all part of who you are as a person. And sometimes cramming at the last minute, well, we've all done it. I mean, whether it's for an exam or for practicing for an audition or for a competition. I remember when I was in the Levenshulme and the Leeds, I was practicing 10, 12 hours a day. But, you pay a price for that. And so you have to also try to maintain a healthy lifestyle. I agree 100% with what Olga said. And of course, nobody would know better than she with all the performances she has. And traveling, which is not easy these days. And, traveling can cause a tremendous amount of stress, especially with what's been going on with the airlines. So somehow you have to always balance is the key.
Anybody else?
Yeah. I, with the time and experience, found out, without knowing it, that I was practicing preventing injuries. We, consciously or unconsciously, we musicians are practicing it innerly. So cooking, good. But
Sure.
cooking, I noticed that I do something to prevent these things, and it needs alertness. And also, walking, okay, not to trip away. It's not that I'm thinking, but unconsciously I saw my body is, when it comes to movement, then preventing it. So in a way, I think it is also in practice. And to know when to stop from practicing. That also, it was innerly practiced when I know the symptom or thought, then I stop. So it is practicing to listen to your body. And that is not, can be done just in a minute. That's why I'm saying it also needs to be practiced innerly.
Yeah, awareness is a really important word for whatever you're doing, because the more awareness you have of yourself and your mind and your body, which is really one thing, the better off you're going to be. And the question that I was going to ask you guys is, I think, an important question that has to do with awareness. So not how do you teach yourself to open your imagination, but how do you teach your students? How do you guide them to that window where they open themselves with enough awareness to create imagination so they can create their own identity and their own inspiration? Because to me, that's the most important thing to teach at this level. Everybody here can play the piano, whether you like it or not. That's, everybody can wiggle their fingers. So it's the imagination, the door to what makes you special, to give the gift of that, oh wow, when you listen. So how do you teach that, or what would you say to them to enable them to do that when they practice? And that, when your imagination, when you're practicing and your imagination is not there, then you know it's a good time to stop, because nothing's happening, right? But that question comes out of that need. So who would like to talk about that?
I have a friend who's a singer, and her husband, who was also a wonderful singer, who passed away a few years ago, said once when we were talking about this, breathe and tell a story. And for me, having an image, especially, it's really throughout all music. Maybe a little bit less so when you're talking about very dissonant, but even when you play something very contemporary and that is very dissonant and focused on rhythm and a lot of clashing tonalities, you can still have a story. But certainly, if you play Mozart, you should know opera, because so many of the figures in Mozart's operas appear in his piano sonatas and piano concerti. And with Beethoven, the same thing. And so it's always about character. For me, the most important thing is to know what is the character of this phrase, and then how does the mood change. And so the more that you listen to opera and symphonies and just expand your repertoire, it's not just piano repertoire, but then have an image, make up a story. Nobody knows what your story is, but if you have a story, somehow that will come through in the way you play. And even if people don't know what the story is, they will respond to them. Because there's something different in your playing. If you play Schumann, you have to have a story. In many cases, with the titles of his works, he already told you. But if you play Kreisleriana, you'd better read Kater Morn by E.T.A. Hoffman, because you can't really understand the whole piece unless you've read that book. So it's a combination of research that helps you, but then also trust your instinct. Do something different. Don't try to copy what everyone else does. And I keep quoting Schumann because he was so right. He said, the problem with imitators is that they imitate that which is obvious, not that which is truly beautiful. And the next thing he said was, the imitation is never as good as the original. So, look for your own voice. For pianists, I think it starts with sound. Having just been on two big competition juries, Montreal and Bachauer, And especially in Montreal, we heard all the pianists, 24, on the same piano. That tells you everything. The variety of sound that the different pianists could produce. And for me, imagination is directly related to sound. How else?
Yeah.
So,
Also wanted to
Yeah.
say that I completely agree with you. But to have, like, when I teach, I always have respect to each individual. Because we are all very different, and I always give room first for my students to reach to me and see if they can convince me with whatever they are doing. Because I think that if you give that possibility to a student, it can nourish and bring something special from them. And I always want to respect this first, and then I always say, from my perspective, because I have already so many years of experience, I say, you know, maybe I love imagination. I think in music, especially in romantic music, it's so important. As you said, for example, like in Liszt transcriptions, if you don't know, you know, Don Juan opera or, you know, Rigoletto or any of this, how you can play this transcriptions without knowing it. You need to imagine, you need to be one actor, a theater, you know, of one actor. You need to know these things, but being a teacher, you need to kind of give this knowledge to a student. You need to guide it in the right direction and give them opportunity to discover this, and you just need to know it as well. It's just very intuitive, but at the same time, freedom is the important part for the student, but at the same time, you need to know when you need to stop and give exact advice, so it will be in the right way. For me, this is always very challenging, but very often very rewarding. So,
Pardon? You want to say something?
I agree with Lydia, especially about the sound. I think that to find the right sound for you, for every particular thing which you feel is the right sound, is the door that opens up your imagination. And if you listen and it's beautiful or it's whatever you want it to be, then you'll be able to develop that into something more. It's a really difficult subject because a lot of it, I think, has to do with with, say, when I teach, of my playing something. And I'm not trying to get the student to exactly play the way I want to, but I try to do something that I believe in, something beautiful and interesting, and that they'll want to create something themselves like that. And especially it would be good if I could play a passage in two really different ways that work, to show that, you know, you don't have to do just one way. And there's a lot of things that go into the attitude too. I mean, whether you have the attitude that you want to get it right and do how it's supposed to play, how it's supposed to be. I mean, in those cases, the student needs to change their attitude, not try to copy CDs, but and so the professor needs to, you know, talk about it, and how you should basically approach music is not trying to live up to some kind of ideal and play like everyone else. I mean, what's the point of that now when we have 600 people sending videos to the Hamamatsu competition and everyone plays like everyone else and nobody wants to hear it? So you have to believe that you actually have something to say yourself. I mean, each of you has your whole life behind you and it's different from everyone else. And so somehow that's the only thing really that you have that's going to make what you do worthwhile, because there are too many other people who play just as well or better than you do, but nobody has your life. And if you can find a way to make that come out in your playing, that's what you should do.
I think I agree with everything that is being said, and maybe I would add something slightly different. Think about music sometimes from the point of view of the composer. A lot of the times we have the music in front of us, we have some sort of code that we have to decipher, and then find out what the code really means. But if you go one step behind that, or before that, what prompted the composer to actually write this? What was the need for writing this, and why somebody decided to create this and to make this into an artistic endeavor? So maybe even venture yourselves into writing your own music. You don't have to be great geniuses at it, but you could just try writing something, because all of a sudden you're going to understand a lot of things about how music is created and built. You're gonna have to face some problems and a lot of choices. And then you're gonna have to have a need to write that. If when you look at the music, you see, okay, why was this composed? Then you know the context, you know everything that my colleagues have been talking about. And then of course, like Professor Greene says, sound is what we work with. So of course sound is the gateway for everything. But what's the intention? What was the composer trying to communicate? And then can I look into my internal world, into my interior world, my experiences, my soul, and can I take that and somehow make it mine and then broadcast it to the public? Can I do that? Can I feel that when I'm reading through the music? Can I identify with what I think the composer was trying to say? So I think when you think of music in this way, all the way from the composer, from the creative fact of creating music out of silence, which is such a beautiful thought. There was silence, and then all of a sudden there is music. And how can you do that? So then it's not really just an exercise on deciphering a code. It's so much more. And then, of course, your own creative spirit can get somehow imbued in there. So that's what I would add to everything else that has been said, which I think is so perfect.
I agree 1,000%. And I think what is so important is that you have to read. I mean, people aren't really reading books anymore. First of all, you have everything on an iPad, which is fine, you can download material. But why not go into a library and look at all the books that are there and read composer biographies? That's as a beginning. Because how can you play Schumann if you don't know what was going on in his life? I mean, that motivated.
The other thing is to look at manuscripts, because
Yeah.
when you look at the handwriting of
Right.
Beethoven or
Yes.
Schubert or
Well, that's
that
actually.
sends a very,
yeah.
very strong message. Very, very strong message. I mean, you don't write anymore, but it's
Right.
very. HieYon, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Connected to what actually everybody said, and especially what Jose said, Professor Mendez. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I want to look for what motivated this composer to write. That's my starting point. And if students say, I have no imagination, I have no thought, then I encourage to read what this composer read, what this composer was interested in, because that gave imagination to this composer. And reading the same, for instance, book like if it is Schumann, E.T.A. Hoffmann, if it's Beethoven, then Goethe, Schiller, then we are on the same world, mental world, spiritual world, and that's where we should get into, I think. So that's what I'm leading to. Book reading, either iPad or even some good film, movie, could be complementary to this. And for that, I'm very thankful for this movie, film industry. They're really studying, I think, they're really exploring and they really do research to make a truthful story, and that could be a good kind of a window for us who's living in 21st century to get connected, to have some way to be connected with these older times and older thoughts and philosophies and so on. And all this would stimulate us to have imagination. Without that, we would be kind of locked in the 21st century, our time. So we need some opening to this, and through, all these materials we had, the way to share the Gedanken and the thoughts.
And the other thing, I would just like to agree with everything. You know, when you're practicing, I'm sure I'm not the only one that does this, talk to yourself. You can say, hey, do I like this? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You can ask your subconscious, how does this feel? Maybe the sound would be better this way. You know, it's it's an experiment. It's not like a fixed method going point by point, and that's why when you read about composers, I'll never forget the first time I looked at Bach's manuscripts. It was just, you could feel his spirit in a completely different way. So, and then it resonated with me about the whole meaning of Bach changed just through that. The whole sound concept and how you would adapt it to piano. So you have to talk to yourself, and you have to make a little space in your repetitions of practicing it over and over again to see how you are responding, see what you like, because you have to like what you're doing. It doesn't matter who told you. You can't just do number 42, you know? It's not like you're picking out the dish from a Chinese menu. It's more involved than that. You're really making the dish. So, question? Yes. Either one. Doesn't matter.
So, as laureates of international competitions and juries for also top competitions, how important do you see competitions as a way for young and emerging artists today to build a career?
Well, I think for competitions, maybe the most important thing is the repertoire you choose. Because, you know, when you play a recital, you can pretty much play anything you want. But in a competition, there was a pianist who started with Beethoven Opus 2, number 1, first piece. And he was fine in the first 3 movements, and then he got to the 4th movement, and the tempo was just too fast, and he got off. The whole opening was bad. And so, you know, of course he didn't pass. And then why would you choose Opus 2, number 1 to begin? Why? It's the same thing. Don't choose the Pathétique Sonata to begin, or the Moonlight Sonata. Don't choose pieces that are so well known that instant comparison
But she was
happens.
asking how important is it to win?
Well, the whole thing is you have to create an impression within 1 minute or less.
And it's very, I think, in my experience, that competitions in our times very important. You go there, you perform the right repertoire, and you are heard, you are seen, and it's not even sometimes important to win. It's just important to play, and to play as you know that it's 100% well, you know. For this, of course, you need to practice and prepare yourself, but because we work so much for being on stage, you know, if you are there already and you're 100% sure, you definitely need to go to the competitions, because then someone will hear you, and as I said, not necessarily if you win. Someone will hear you, invite you for a concert, invite you something, and it's opportunity for you to be on stage and to be heard. Nowadays, it's the only possibility I see, in my opinion. Not necessarily the best opportunity, and possibility, but this is the only one where you can be on stage and show what you can do. Yeah, not to play for the jury, not to please the jury, you know, but to do what you love to do. And if you want to be on stage and you want to be a concert pianist, you just be on stage and just play how you want to do it and show everyone what you worked for all these hours. Yeah, and the competitions are giving a lot of opportunities to be on stage. This is for me, I was looking for this because I knew from an early age that I want to perform, you know. I love being on stage, and that was for me opportunity. And of course, winning the competition is not only a way to stay in the concert world. You need to work, you need to constantly work after you win. If you want to continue to be on stage and to do something special, you need to work all your life to be there on that level, you know. So it's constant work, but I think answering your question, it's for me, I don't see any other way, because YouTube and recordings is totally different. You know, now there's a lot of internet stars, how they play live, you know, we don't know really. But live performance is the only real performance you can see and feel if this young person is an artist and you want to hear this the person. This is what competition is giving you. It gives you opportunity to be on stage, and I think this is very important.
Well, I mean, that's the big difference, because now virtually all the competitions have live streams or Medici TV. And there are a lot of presenters who listen to those broadcasts. And so that's the point. Sometimes someone who didn't even make it to the finals may be able to get some concerts if a presenter hears you. But I go back to the repertoire because I think it's critically important. I mean, it's wonderful to find a piece by a great composer who's well known, but the piece is not.
Yes.
That's one way you can do it. Play something, the very first impression is what stays. I mean, obviously you have to start well and keep getting better. If you don't start so well, then already the chances are not so good. But start with something that is not known, because that's really what, first of all, the judges are very interested. And if they don't know the piece, they're not going to be quite as critical as they would be listening to something that's been played 1,000,000 times.
And also the repertoire-wise, if you are comfortable with something more, than if you would start with Bach Prelude and Fugue, which is not your thing. You know, and someone would play Goldberg variations incredibly, but someone would not be able to play Scriabin or Rachmaninoff. You need to make sure that your repertoire is the exact repertoire for you at this moment. And a lot of big competitions giving you opportunity to actually choose your own repertoire for many rounds. And this is where you can see if this pianist is creative, this pianist understands what he wants or she wants. This is a very important aspect to choose the right repertoire.
I mean, if someone woke you up in the middle of the night, could you go to the piano and play the first piece perfectly, even if you're half asleep? I mean, it has to be so much a part of you.
Yeah.
And just remember that first impression is really what lasts.
Maybe that will help. The judges are looking for thinking, do I want this person listen again? So that's some kind of measure we have, right, when we judge. Do I want this person again? Then it goes to the next round. Mm-hmm. So even though you make a huge mistake, something like
it's
that,
just
I want to hear it once more.
Yeah, that happens often when you see the repertoire for their next round and you see some piece on the next round. You think, wow, I'd really like to hear how they play that particular piece.
Yes, that brings. And then another factor is because competition looks for somebody who can be on the career. So with this person, when it's given like 100 concerts, can he or she make it? Because, okay, one round was brilliant, but it gives me a mark that this is everything he can offer, she can offer. is steadiness, stability is also one fact for the career. So next to the personality, judges are looking for that fact too.
Next question? Go ahead.
So I'm currently playing the Mozart Sonata, and I've been encouraged to add in my own ornamentations, but I've also been warned to not do it for an audition or for a competition. And since you all serve on the jury for many competitions, I was wondering what your thoughts are on this.
Why?
Well, Carter Johnson, who was the second prize winner in the Bach Hour, played a Mozart E-flat concerto in the finals before he played the Prokofiev second. And he did fantastic ornamentation. I mean, really amazing. And for me, the most important thing is that you do it in good taste. It should sound like Mozart and not like something artificial. So if you can, create ornamentation that really fits in, I mean, in some Mozart piano concerto, you have to add ornaments. Like I did quite a few when I used to play 595, the last concerto. And so I think it's always a matter of good taste. And if it sounds authentic, I mean, if it sounds like Mozart, where you really couldn't distinguish what he wrote and what you wrote, then I would say do it. I think it's actually very fashionable these days.
I don't think there are many really conservative people left who would say, you can't do this, you can't do that.
I mean, creativity is so important, so anything that you want to do that you like, that is tasteful and creative, go for it. It's to be
Well,
encouraged.
Robert Levin's been teaching this at Juilliard for a number of years. He's the master of ornamentation and improvisation. If you've never heard any of his lectures, you should look them up. I mean, for him, it's effortless. But what's so great about when he does the ornamentation is it's so natural. It really, so I don't think there should be any bad feelings about doing it, but in good taste.
Wow.
Next
How do
question.
we find the good taste?
Wow.
Another question?
Can I add
Yes,
something?
go ahead, sure.
In order to do, if you're gonna do something like this, are you familiar with C.P. Bach treatise on read that, read that? There's a lot of good instruction there to know how to add certain things. And actually, there's a small chapter on good performance, what makes a good performance. And it's still so pertinent to 2024. So if you want to have a little guide on how do I do this, I will go to C.P. Bach.
And one final thing, Hummel, who was a student of Mozart, rewrote some of the Mozart piano concertos for piano quartet. And I have played a couple of them. I mean, some of the ornamentations are crazy, but the slow movement ones, also Kramer, who was a student of Beethoven, he wrote the great exercises. He did wonderful ornamentations for slow movements. So I think, if you do a little bit of research and try to listen to some of the Hummel and Kramer, and there are others. Ferdinand Ries, I think, was also a student of Beethoven. He did some, because ornamentation was very popular in those days. And I think it still is. I really do.
Another question? Yeah.
So I've asked this question at every Q&A so far, but
You can ask it at the next one, do that one.
so a lot of books have been mentioned in this discussion so far, and I was wondering if you had any more books related to music that you would recommend, or books or sources.
I have a recommendation. It's kind of unusual thing. There was a book written in, I think, 1954 called Beethoven and His Nephew, a psychoanalytic study by a married couple named Sterba. And it's out of print, but there's usually on Amazon some used copy of it for $2. And it's amazing. amazing, really. There's so much actual documentation. For example, in the Austrian courts at the time, where Beethoven showed up quite a few times, there was a scribe writing things down. So everything that he said, we know exactly. And of course, the conversation books have the other person's side of the conversation, but we can reconstruct what Beethoven would have said. So there's a lot of material that's actually in that book about his final years, and I would recommend to get that book. It's not very long, and it's fascinating to read through, and also listen to the music he was writing at the same time. It's just incredible, the discrepancy, or the difference between his actual life and the string quartets and the Missus Solemnis that he was writing at the time. So I think you can learn a lot from that, and you'll never forget that.
Well, I think many would already know this book, but I mentioned it. It's in German, Die Klaviertechnik from Neuhaus. I heard it in English.
I did the art of
The artist,
Order piano playing,
The art of
yeah.
piano.
Oh, yeah, that famous Neuhaus. Maybe all of you know this book, don't you? If not, I recommend.
There is a great, I don't know if it was translated to English though. I think that they were trying to translate. It's by really fantastic teacher, Eugene Zimakin, whose students were Plitnyov and Pagarevich. He did a great research and book with incredible exercises for technique. I think it's probably one of the best from any exercises was written, Brahms, I mean, everything what you can possibly, and even if it's just, Russian edition, you have all the examples there of the exercises, and they're just fascinating. And it's for each of Chopin etudes, you have special exercises there. He really developed incredible exercises for the mind. So one hand is, doing one thing, another hand is doing another thing completely, so it separates two brains of our brain, pianistic brain. So it's incredible. You can find it on the internet. They were talking about Plitnyov actually was talking about to translate it to English. So maybe there is English translation as well.
I wanted to point a couple of books. Personally, I think you should be basically read everything that gets in your hands that is about music, and about other things too. But there is a book of master classes with Liszt that is very interesting. And then another one, I don't remember, I think it might be called like that, Master Classes with Liszt or Liszt Master Classes, something like that. I'm sure you can, Google it and find it. And then the other one that I would recommend, this is a little stranger, less obvious, but this is something that Claudio Arrau, the great Chilean pianist, would recommend to his students. And it's a little book called Zen in the Art of Archery.
Oh, yeah.
Zen.
Zen, as in
And
Buddhism.
Yeah,
Is it called Elixir?
It's a book about a German person that goes to Japan to study archery.
Oh, no, this is different.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very small book. You can read it like in 3 hours. And apparently doesn't have any musical information in there, but then when you start thinking about what this person goes through to learn the art of archery in Japan, you start realizing that a lot of it has to do with the way we use our bodies, the way we move, the way we perceive things. And then you can start drawing very interesting parallels between that and the way we play the instrument. So that might be also fun to read, you know.
That's true. Actually, this is really fascinating.
Yeah.
In terms of this concentration, so similar, as you said. Yeah. That is so.
Anybody have a final question? Otherwise, we have reached the double bar.